What's up, guys? Welcome to Mets Off Day Live. I'm Niki Lattarulo. Today I'm joined by SNY MLB insider Andy Martino and SNY contributor Dani Wexelman. Guys, thanks for joining us on the show. The Mets' struggles in June continued after a tough stretch against the Phillies and the Braves. Somehow things managed to get worse as they were swept by the Pirates. And to make matters worse, they were outscored 30-4 by a team that is 15 games under 500. Things have gotten ugly in June. The Mets have 3 wins in their last 16 games. So let's talk about it. Dani, I'm going to start with you. Is this kind of a perfect storm of bad pitching, bats getting cold, just all around not great play from the Mets, or does this kind of show what team the Mets are?
No, I don't think this is indicative of how this team is going to finish this season. Man, oh man, has it been an ugly month. I don't know if there are many other teams in the league that are happy to wave goodbye to June than the New York Mets are. Right now, it was ugly to start and then somehow got uglier. And over the past weekend, I think you just saw the worst of the team, right? I don't know if it's rock bottom. I don't know if there's more to come, but I do feel like maybe they finally were able to hit rock bottom and that gut check, right? If you're calling a players only meeting, to me, that's saying, all right, we got to get our stuff in order now. They did this last year too, right? There were points throughout the season, which is why I don't feel like that this is who this team is. There's way too much talent. You don't go and get a guy like Juan Soto because you think your team is not going to make the postseason. That's not why you get that guy and bring him to your team for 15 years. And so, number one, I feel like they're midweek against Atlanta. They split that series. You're starting to see all of the things Carlos Mendoza is talking about, like when traffic is on the bases, when guys are in scoring position, they're doing a better job of playing fundamental baseball. And you're seeing other guys in the lineup start to contribute. And then it just unraveled in Pittsburgh. And losing Griffin Canning hurts, right? That's a gut check to the team. You're still waiting on some other guys to come back. But I think the killer for me right now, and I would guess you both will agree, is I feel like the consistent issue is runners in scoring position, at least from the offensive side of things. You're second worst in the league. The only team that's worse than you is the White Sox. And so something needs to trigger where you're back to playing those fundamental type games, because that's not going to play in the postseason. And then on the pitching side, I just feel like they've regressed to the mean a little bit. The last 2 weeks, they've got the worst ERA in baseball. They woke up this morning with an ERA above 6, right? Remember, this was a team who led the league in ERA, their starters and their bullpen, for a big bulk of this season. And so I think they've just run into the perfect storm over this last month, the last few weeks. It's not going to sustain. There's no way. There's too much talent. But unfortunately, the buzzsaw is hitting from every angle. And so not only did the players have to call a meeting, I think that the fans also had a fans only meeting.
Fans only meeting.
And Andy did that to get them back on track too.
If we weren't live, I would. If we weren't live, I would have said, "Is that different from an OnlyFans meeting?" But we are live, so I wouldn't say anything that inappropriate. Fans only. Anyway, once we start, I'll clean it up. Oh, we're on. I'm sorry. What was the question? What's wrong with the Mets?
What's wrong with the Mets? But also, Andy, we talked about the players only meeting. Can you take us through that meeting? What was said during it? And I mean, you would think after a players only meeting, things would go up, but it somehow just got worse.
Yeah, look, I wasn't in Pittsburgh. I was covering some of the Yankee series here at home, but certainly doesn't sound like anything particularly noteworthy was said in that meeting based on what the players have shared. And to the credit of, I think Brandon Nimmo said this, and maybe it was Francisco Lindor, that they didn't expect that meeting to change anything immediately. It's a situation where it's nice. They have a good group of players who care, that want to get together and talk through things, and that's a positive. But when these kinds of meetings end up on back pages and end up a big thing, it's probably overstated. They did have a meeting last year that got pretty well hyped because it came with their turnaround. But these things just tend to be, hey, let's get together and chop it up. And I think that's all it really sounds like it was.
Yeah, I mean, so like we said, the meeting didn't work. Andy just mentioned that they lost 12-1. But Dani, are you glad that they're recognizing the fact that they were once, 21 games over 500? Now I think they're 11 games under 500 or over 500. Do you think that it's okay, at least they're taking matters into their own hands and trying not to let this spiral?
I think the positive that everyone should be taking away right now is even with how poor the play has been, this is a team who is still right in the thick of not only the lead spot in the National League East, but also in the postseason conversation. With all the bad and all the struggles and all the frustrations, like because they built up in the first few months of the season, it's almost like having a little house money, right? You have that house money. It shouldn't be looked at it that way. I'm sure the players don't, but from people who are enjoying this team and love watching this team, because they played so well to start, you kind of have a little wiggle room here, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're having a slump. Don't forget, the Braves had a slump at the start of this season, right? A lot of teams have slumps. Every team goes through this at some point. This is when the Mets are going through it right now. They went through it last year at the beginning of the season, and look what happened at the end. This is going to happen. But the key here is accountability, right? Francisco Lindor, always at his locker, always taking responsibility for what's happening. And the other guys are too. So that's to me like the main thing. It can't just be like, I remember listening to Brandon Hyde talk about the Orioles earlier this year before he was let go. And it just felt to me that there wasn't responsibility being taken for the level of play. Like there's a standard here and this team knows it and they act like it. And not only do they do that, they talk about it too. And so I am always grateful to see them taking responsibility. It's not surprising that they're doing it, but I think what's tough is just because you do that, just because you have the meeting, to Andy's point, doesn't mean results will happen right away. They got absolutely spanked 12-1 by the Pirates. Let's give them a little credit. The Pirates have a really good pitching staff. The Mets didn't even have to see Paul Skeens, but they are a horrible offensive team. So for the Mets pitching staff to allow the amount of runs and the way those runs were scored, like that's where I have issues. So yes, I am grateful they did it. I think they're going to be fine. I'm not pushing panic buttons, but there are some fundamental things about the way they play the game that have to get turned around.
Yeah, I think not hitting the panic button yet, but also a little bit hitting the panic button because they were 5.5 games up on the NL East, and now they're only 1.5 games back. So they're still right there, but they really can't let things spiral anymore. You spoke about the pitching, which we're going to get to a little bit, but let's talk a little bit more about the lack of offense. A lot of blame has been directed at hitting coaches, Jeremy Barnes and Eric Chavez. Andy, you wrote an article on SNY.TV about how the Mets are not planning on making any changes. Yeah. What do you think the reason is for that? And do you think that's the right move?
Well, they think that right at the moment, the front office just believes in the coaches. It's been a longer sample that they've had with these guys, obviously, over a season and a half now since Stearns and Mendoza took over. So they know their coaches more than what you learn simply from this relatively small sample of a terrible stretch of baseball that they're playing. And they just don't at the moment think that the coaches are to blame or that they would be improved by changing coaches. I think when you look at hitting in particular, I think generally in the game nowadays, most players have their own private hitting instructors. Many of the big agencies like Boris Corp have hitting analytics and hitting instructors and feedback that they give their clients. So the staff hitting coach on the team isn't in any way the only voice or even close to the only voice in these players' ears. So a team that a front office that knows as an organization would look and say, well, is this really anything that Eric Chavez is doing poorly or Jeremy Barnes is doing poorly? And I'm not saying that any coach is perfect, but the Mets just don't think that's the issue right now. And if you go around the rest of the staff, Mets have best-in-class pitching coaches, and Jeremy Hefner, Desi Drushel, and the bullpen coach, Jose Rosado, who doesn't get any pub, but is an important part of the group too. The pitching, to Danny's point, has been really, really troubling. And you're not thinking like, oh, a change of coaches would solve this. And then just going around the diamond, guys like Mike Sarbaugh and Glenn Sherlock and John Gibbons, and they all have their specialties. They all do them well. So I understand. I'm not just like shoving aside the fan impulse to be like, did you see that? We just got blown out 30-4 by the freaking Pirates. Can you do something? I get the emotion, but it's David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza's job to dispassionately look at it and say, well, what would improve our team? And it's very, very rare that replacing a coach midseason improves a team. It's about the personnel and how they're performing.
Well, I want to follow up on that because you said that a lot of the players have private hitting instructors. How do you think these players then balance getting conflicting information or over information or too much going on? Like, how do they kind of just like hone in on what the problem is?
A really good question. I think it's important to remember that these guys are big leaguers. So I'm not trying to diminish the role of a coach. These guys are important if they're good, but they're not developing anymore, right? They're here. They're grown men, 30 years old or thereabouts. And so they don't need to be taught a lot. So sometimes it's enough, Nikki. Again, great questions, making me think. But the role of an Eric Chavez is to say, like, all right, I know big league hitters. I know you and your checkpoints. Like, let's work on those and let's make sure you're feeling good today. And you balance that maybe with some of the stuff you're getting in the off season from your private guys. Like, I know that the Boris hitting people have helped Pete Alonso stop chasing as many pitches out of the zone. So you're right. There are a lot of different voices that go into these guys' heads. And I guess it's up to them as professionals to figure out how to filter it all. But yeah, there's so much information in the game today that can be a challenge, getting too much of it for sure.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I don't think people realize that there are like outside coaches and there's all these analytics now, and there really is a lot going on. Plus, they're playing almost every day. So a lot to balance. Let's talk about Francisco Alvarez, someone that was struggling on the hitting aspect, but now he's back down in AAA, hit 2 homers in 2 consecutive games, or hit homers in 2 consecutive games. Dani, how long do you think he should stay down there? Should he come back up? What is your vibe with the whole situation?
Yeah, I think number one, I love to see that guy getting his confidence back. He is going to be so important to this team when they call him back up. I think predominantly on the pitching side and managing that staff. I think the standard to which he set early in his career maybe was so high, it was unrealistic to think he would be able to repeat that. And I think that's true. Like, people forget he's still so young. He's early 20s. Like, he's only been doing this a couple of years and he's dealt with injuries. I don't need Francisco Alvarez back up tomorrow. He's not going to save the offense right now. He's not the thing or the key or the spark that's going to change things. Like, they need him to continue to remain consistent, to continue to figure out, I don't know, like where his strike zone is, right? What makes him comfortable at the plate? How is he going to get the most out of his bat while balancing being a full-time catcher? Like, I think people don't realize how hard that position is. Even if you're not throwing fingers down anymore, even if it's changed a little bit in that way, it's one of the most grueling, if not the most grueling positions in all of baseball. And so, again, I don't need him to come up tomorrow. I'm okay for him to stay down there and work on a few things. This team right now and their offense is way too talented. They're leaving so much meat on the bones. It's up to them. Like, to your point of the conversation of moving hitting coaches or getting rid of hitting coaches, like, this isn't on them. This is on the players 100%. Like, we know what these guys are capable of because we've seen it. Not much has changed when it comes to that offense except for adding Juan Soto. And his last month, by the way, was really dang good, right? You're starting to see that. He led the Mets for the entire month of June. You want to see it all together, but I don't need Alvarez up to solve it. I want him to figure out all those details. And when the time is right, they will bring him back up. But he does not need to come up and save the Mets offense.
Speaking of the details, we know Alvarez spent a lot of time this offseason changing up his stance. But since he's been back in AAA, it looks like he's back to his original stance. Andy, do you think that's the team telling him, like, go back to what you know, or is he kind of taking matters into his own hands? Like, I got to go back to what I know because this obviously isn't working.
That's a good question. I don't know specifically why he decided to arrive at that, and that's a good pickup. I think that I agree with Dani more broadly that this should not be a hurry. He needs to just feel like a man among boys in AAA for a while and just be reminded, like, you're really, really good at hitting a baseball and just feel good about himself. This is a sensitive young man, and different from Mark Vientos, by the way. Mark Vientos carries his confidence with him that really serves him, I think. And he's obviously not had the year that he's wanted to have. But he knows, like, deep in his bones that he's good. And you can just tell. And he's not cocky. He's super nice. But he's just like, no, I'm fine. I'm good. And he doesn't get broken by struggle. Whereas Alvarez, I think I've seen, can really, really be hard on himself and beat himself up. So it's just the thing for him to do, whatever stance makes him most comfortable, makes him feel about himself, whatever catching mechanics, whatever, everything, just go there, feel good, enjoy baseball, rake, and don't come back until you feel like a stud again, basically.
Can I add too, like, to
Please.
your point, like overarching what we've all been talking about is like the Mets have done to me like an organizational shift of making sure that guys have specific plans, right? Like I know you know this, Andy, like Jeremy Hefner and his staff create specific plans for every guy and they're tailored to them. But also they're like, hey, what's your wife's name? What are your children's names? Like, what do you like to do outside of baseball? And I think that that also applies to Alvarez in the sense of like, we know at the core who this guy is and what he needs and the kind of support that he needs. And if he wants to change his stance, by all means, like I feel like they've done a really great job of that. And so that is why you have seen the highs from this team, and they just need to get back to that. The Mets have done a great job of allowing them to be themselves. Like that is something last year you saw come to fruition. People are kind of clamoring for that again this year. They're like, is there a Grimace coming? Is there a Seymour Wiener coming? Is something coming to save the team? But it's the guys, right? And when they're going well, you see that chemistry. It's because they've been allowed and supported to be who they are. And to Andy's point, like Alvarez does seem to wear a little bit more on him, and that's okay. But now he needs to go work on it down there before he can come back up.
The Mets got to get their swag back. We know they have swag. We know they're a fun group of guys. I think everyone's just kind of like getting down on themselves. And I think this All-Star break can't come at a better time. This day off can't come at a better time because once they get back in the rhythm, I think we know they're a really dangerous team. But a lot of this struggle has to do with injuries. The Mets starting pitching rotation, which had so many pitchers recently, is now kind of depleted. Andy, I'm going to go down a list of a couple of players that are injured, and you can maybe give us some updates, status, potential timeline return. Let's start with Sean Manaea. What do we know about him? When can we see him back?
Well, this is not a good development. What we know about him now is he's got a little bone fragment rolling around in his left elbow, which is new information for a guy who's had such a hard time coming back from the oblique injury. He was supposed to be back in April. Now here we are in July tomorrow, and he's not back. So the new elbow issue, they're hoping that a cortisone shot resolves that he can make another rehab start sometime this week. That from there, perhaps he could be activated. And in talking to Manaea last week when he was just recently made aware of the elbow issue, he was more hopeful than certain that he would be okay this year. It was like, Sean, do you think you're going to pitch to this bone? They call it a loose body, bone fragment with no pain. And he goes, yeah, I hope so. Never had one before. So they're going to have to see how he gets through this week, how he recovers from his bullpen, when he does his rehab, how he recovers from that. And then they hope back soon after that.
Yeah, he's a huge part of this rotation, but you even wonder when he does come back, is he going to be the same guy he was last year? A lot of unknowns. What about Kodai Senga, Andy?
He's not. They're keeping his arm active during the hamstring issue, but no significant developments there in terms of a rehab or news on when exactly he's going to come back. So that just becomes like the hamstring still having to heal a little bit.
Yeah, we'll talk about him more in just a second. But finally, what about Tyler McGill? Any update on him?
No, they don't know, and they haven't said exactly when he's going to start throwing again. That's another elbow issue. He seemed to have avoided the worst with ligament damage, anything season-ending, but certainly you got a guy with a sore elbow. Nothing announced as to how long he's going to be continue to be shut down for, so that's kind of where that one is.
Yeah, and then, of course, Griffin Canning out for the season. So a lot of bad news for the Mets in the pitching department. So, Danny, let's start with Sean Manaea. Are you concerned about this setback? Do you think he'll be back to his regular form when he comes back?
Well, I think, Andy, I believe you and I were both at the David Stearns.
Oh, you were there.
I was.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh,
you
were there.
You were there. I was there. I was quietly in the back. I like to hide. I like to hide from everybody. I was there. And, David Stearns, number one, continues to do a great job with his team. There's never a panic or it feels like worry in his voice. So he's doing a good job on that front. And it sounded to me, somebody first of all asked him if he would need surgery. I think it was Anthony DeComo, and he said, no, we don't expect that. And two, he seemed confident that Sean Manaea would be back and be able to pitch with this loose body. Listen, I'm not a doctor. I am not Andy Martino, the insider, but I will say, anytime that there is an issue like this, I think there is concern. You don't know how he's going to respond. If he hasn't experienced this in his career, then there's nothing you can be certain about. And I think that stinks, because you want to be able to say, no, I'm good. I think he's going to be fine. I cannot say that. I think that it's okay to be concerned about it. And I will say this, like, when he does come back, you don't know exactly what version you're going to get. There's going to have to be some patience involved when Manaea comes back and is able to rejoin. I hope that it's fine. I hope that there is not lingering issues, but I can't sit here and tell you like that I'm certain that Sean Manaea is going to be okay and just slide right back in and assume the job that he had, because he did such a great job. That's what's tough, right? Like, he was the ace of the staff, and now they're dealing with so much more. You want that guy back. He's also like a great person to talk to. He's a pleasure to be around, and great for that clubhouse. But I would say it's a little frustrating on his end and probably the team's end.
Mm-hmm. Agree with all that.
As a whole, like I said earlier, they had so many pitchers. We were like, oh, are they going to do a 6-man rotation? This is great. They have so many guys. Now, again, they have like nobody left. Andy, do you think that the Mets need to bring in reinforcements, either temporary or long-term, while these guys are rehabbing and coming back, and maybe just in case they're not fully back on their back?
They've been trying every day, right? They're literally making pitching roster moves just about every single day. It's hit that point of just survival mode. Mm-hmm. I mean, so they're trying, Niki, but it's hard. It's really hard to address this many injuries in a pitching staff in season. I think we know there's been struggles with the offense, but I really see the pitching as the primary problem here, and the primary roadblock to get them back on track, because they're trying to get back to their winning ways here, but you're throwing pitchers out there every night. It's tough to go on a run with as depleted as they are, and the guys that are starting and the guys in the bullpen right now. When a guy like a Max Kranick, who was so effective early, is gone to an injury. With a guy like Oscar Brazoban, who was also so effective early on in the bullpen, is kind of looking a little fried right now. And you have these ripple effects through the whole staff. So what you end up doing, to your point, Niki, is signing guys, DFAing guys, optioning guys like every day. But it's just not helping you get out of the way. It's what they have to do, and good for them for being proactive. But there's a reason guys like this are available midseason for that kind of churn, is you're not necessarily able to bring in difference makers when the difference makers that you have go on the injured list. It's just really tough. And the Mets got in a tough spot with timing of this too, where McGill and Senga went down before Montas and Manaea were really ready. So that's when the losing really started to spiral. If even just a healthy McGill and Senga had been making the regular starts over this terrible stretch of baseball, the record could conceivably be a lot better. The emergency wouldn't be as severe. But the guys that they're having to throw out there, it's not ideal.
Yeah, and it's probably tough. There's no consistency. It feels like it's a different guy every day, and that has to be hard for the bullpen being cohesive. Another pitcher rehabbing in the minors. I feel like I've forgotten about all the guys that were once pitching, and now everyone's injured. Brooks Raley, what's the latest on him, Andy?
Yeah, they're hoping to have him back after the All-Star break. A Tommy John situation, you never know how long it's going to take him to really be himself. But that is a nice thing to have in your back pocket, especially considering the loss of A.J. Minter, not just a lefty, but a high-leverage guy. Brooks Raley at his best is both of those things, a lefty and a high-leverage guy. Well, he's a lefty even when he's at his worst. But he's been at his best. He's high-leverage, really good reliever. So if he can be the guy he was before surgery, a big if coming off of a surgery, but second half, that's a nice addition for them potentially.
Yeah, Dani, what kind of impact do you think he could make as a veteran coming into this bullpen?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Brooks Raley. Like, when he's healthy, he's an underrated, underestimated guy in the league, and I feel like he's sorely missed right now. So, number one, he's a lefty no matter what. Andy's right, on his worst.
Every day of his life.
Every day of his life, he still gets to be a lefty, which I love. Right. I love it. Like, having the left-handed presence is absolutely missed. And reminder, like, that's allowing Carlos Mendoza to mix and match more. And that makes his life a little bit easier. And he has more options. That's always better for a manager, but having a veteran guy in there who's kind of been there and done that and can also understand, hey, the offense isn't there. So here's how we can make their jobs easier. Here's how we can do a better job. And just having another arm available, right? Like, you can never have enough starters. You can never have enough bullpen pieces. And David Stearns has been crafty in how he's assembled this team, to Andy's point, like a lot of guys going up and down and changing spots and whatever they have to do to configure this pitching situation out. It's exhausting, but having a Brooks Raley who is effective will be a difference maker for the Mets.
I feel like now we're just talking about all the injuries. I'm like, this is depressing. I wish we have some good things to talk about, but two more offensive injuries to cover: Jesse Winker and Jose Siri. Andy, any updates on their status? Andy's
You're
just
right.
giving us all the updates today.
The whole team seems to be. It's one of those years. And look, Winker. This is one who will help to lengthen the lineup. This is one of the reasons I'm not so worried about the lineup. Alvarez will be back at some point. Still believe in Vientos. The DH situation's been tough, but Winker will be back to address that. To answer your question, Nikki, he's in rehab games right now. Shouldn't be too much longer before he's ready to rejoin the team. So that's good. And Jose Siri, not close, which is part of the reason why I expect the Mets to look for a center fielder at the trade deadline. Just that fractured bone in his leg is not healing the way they had hoped it would. So I think they're going to. Another way they're going to lengthen their lineup is to try to add a center fielder.
Let's stop talking about the injuries and all the bad things. Let's talk about the trade deadline. The Mets have plenty of talent across the board, which you know, but definitely been underperforming, making it a challenge. Carlos Mendoza and David Stearns, they're not known to be reactionary, but Dani, do you think this tough stretch, they were 45-24 before this stretch. Now things are starting to go downhill. Do you think that'll change their approach going into the deadline?
I still think they probably need a little more time to kind of see what direction their team is heading. Like, if in the next 2 weeks before the All-Star break, they can start to see some positive signs from that offense. Because to Andy's point, I think the pitching could get back on track before the offense does, which will be helpful, right? You need run prevention. If you can't produce those runs, you at least need to prevent them from happening. And then, yeah, they do have to look at the market. But here's the reminder, is that because the playoffs have been expanded now, a lot of teams will be in this race until the very end, right? And the National League right now is a really crowded race. It's interesting. I do feel like in the American League, it's starting to become a little more crowded, which means less people available, less guys on the market. And if you want one of those guys, you're going to have to pony up. And it doesn't seem to me, and Andy will know better than I do, that David Stearns and Steve Cohen want to deplete that farm system. I think that they still very much value what that means to them. I think teams that succeed the most, aka the Astros, you have the strongest farm systems. You develop from within. So, like, yeah, you could bring in a center fielder. I've seen Byron Buxton's name floated around from the Twins. Like, the Twins are a sinking ship right now. But just because you bring him in doesn't necessarily mean that's the right move for your team. And the Mets seem hyper-focused on that idea. They want to bring the right guy in, and they don't want to give away everything they have. They value that farm system. So it's going to be a dog-eat-dog fight to get some of that top talent at the deadline. But I do think the way they spent this offseason and their plans for the future, that they are always going to be active at that deadline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with all that. Sorry to interrupt you, Nikki. I agree with what you said, Dani, and that I think they will be aggressive. Yes, their farm system is important to them, but like you said, they're in this thing to win it. I think Cohen and Stearns are aggressive by nature. And they know that this is a window that they're in. Francisco Lindor is not getting any younger. Pete Alonso's only here this year. You know, there's a lot of different things that we can say as to why this has to be now. And they've given their young players a lot of experiences here. So they have a really good idea with how do they feel about potentially moving this guy versus that guy versus that guy. A lot of guys have gotten major league experience. So I could see being a little more comfortable saying, all right, do you value Brett Beatty this way, other team? Mm-hmm. Okay, fine. We could see that sort of thing. They've seen their guys now, the Mets have. So I wouldn't be surprised if you saw a named prospect or young player go in a trade because Mets are trying to win here.
Do you think, Andy, because I wanted to touch on what Dani said about their farm system. We know they value their farm system, but do you think at this year's trade deadline, if things are still going the way they are, that they're more likely to trade from the farm system or deal a guy like Vientos, Beatty, or Mauricio even?
Either. It depends. I think it depends on what the market is. It's like a boring answer, I know, but it's still too early that they're not talking specific players yet. So if you want player X and the team you're working with says we want Brett Beatty, we're not interested in Jonah Tong, then okay, you talk about Brett Beatty. So it's too soon to say, but I don't think there'd be a whole lot of players that would be off limits to talk about.
Yeah, Dani, you mentioned the center fielder from the Twins that you've heard maybe linked to the Mets. Is there anyone specific you would like to see the Mets get as a center fielder?
Oh gosh. I'm racking my brain. I mean, listen, when Byron Buxton is healthy, Byron Buxton is one of the best players in Major League Baseball. He's actually on pace this year for a career season, specifically in the power department. He's a guy that is going to run every single thing out in center field. He's a premier glove out there, but it's really hard to keep him healthy. And so that's the risk that you would be taking going after a guy like that. And listen, the Twins are a team that were projected to win the American League Central in the offseason. They were the team. And so I don't know what direction they're trying to head, but if they think that they have a chance of getting into the wild card, they're going to want major league ready talent, right? To Andy's point, they're going to want guys who are ready to go. The Mets know who those guys are. And so it's not going to be from the farm system. Are you willing to part with the guys that you've developed in your system? That's a question they'll have to ask. I mean, Buxton would be pretty high on the list. I'm trying to rack my brain of other center fielders that would be
Mullins in Baltimore, right?
That's yeah. I mean, I think I would take Buxton over Cedric Mullins, but yeah, Cedric Mullins' name will for sure be at the. I'm really intrigued what the Orioles are going to do. Actually, what they deem, what they think is going to happen for themselves at the trade deadline. But yeah, I mean. There aren't going to be, again, it's not going to be a ton of names because a lot of teams are going to be in the race. And so it's going to require you to spend or give up a lot of value if you want to get that guy on your team now.
That's a great point.
Yeah, Andy, anyone you would specifically like the Mets to see the Mets target?
I think that it's almost like a category, like if it's a Buxton or a Mullins or guys that are not superstars but good. It's like take your pick. It almost depends on. It's not like which player do I prefer more. It's like what price makes the most sense. It's all kind of like a group of guys. Now, there's one who stands out that I find interesting, which is Jarren Durant, who I have heard around the Red Sox that it's not crazy to think that he might become available. It's certainly no sure thing. So that would be a guy with some real years of control and some star potential. That'd be a different category. That'd be kind of interesting. And I'm just saying this. I haven't heard Brett Beatty through sourcing linked to Boston, but I know his swing, he likes to hit the ball the other way, would play really well in Fenway Park. So there's some things you can think about like that are kind of like theoretical. But I don't think it matters so much who they get as long as they get a guy that gives them more offense and center than what they currently receive.
Yeah, the offense definitely needs to step up. So anyone they can get to help it step up, I think Mets fans are willing to take them in. Let's talk about the next couple of series. We know the All-Star break is coming up. Like I said, a good time for the Mets to take a break. They host the Brewers, which is a team that have won 8 of their last 10. So they're hot right now. And then the Yankees this week, which also not looking too good. They need the All-Star break as well. Dani, which player do you want to see or need to see step up in these next 2 series?
Yeah, isn't it ironic that the Subway Series this weekend and both of these New York teams they're just having a tough time right now, man. They're trying to catch the subway right as the doors are closing. That's probably literally right now. Yeah. Did you say for the Mets that I want to see step up for the Mets?
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh. I mean, I want to see Lindor step up. I think it's fair to say that about the guy who leads this team literally in the lineup, leads him with his voice, with his actions, with the way that he goes about his business. And, over this last month, just watching him struggle, knowing what he's capable of, how he can set the tone. And again, he stands at his locker every game, every day, and he takes accountability. And so I would love to put that on him, knowing that he can take it and handle it. And then I do feel like they go as he goes. I've always said this about him with his tenure in New York, that he is the most important person in that lineup. And I get it. He's not homegrown, but he is the leader of this team, and people like to follow a leader. They want to see their leader setting the pace, and that's what he does really well.
Andy, what about you? Anyone you need to see step up, or do you agree that it has to be Lindor?
I think Lindor's the perfect answer for the reasons that Dani said. We'll leave that there because I think they need their stars to play like stars right now in the worst way. So for sure, I will add to that secondary answers like Mark Vientos, who like, let's go, buddy, you're really good, and they could really use you, producing like you're capable. So that's one, and then I'm going to go outside the box. But to make a point, and that someone who needs to step up is Paul Blackburn, and the reason is not just because he hasn't been effective lately, but because I believe he's slated right now to start Friday against the Yankees, and he is representative of what we were talking about before, of a pitching staff that's just really, it's hard to see where they're going to be better in the near future with what they have to run out there every day with all the injuries. So for a guy like Blackburn, who knows how to pitch and has been good with the Mets at various points, for him to actually throw a good game against the Yankees will go a long way toward helping to just ease these troubles that this banged-up pitching staff is having.
Yeah, and the Brewer series is kind of going to set the tone, I think, for the Subway series, and then you got to go into the All-Star break on a high note. How important is it, Dani, that they almost like sweep the Brewers and really need to make a splash, especially after that players only meeting did not work in that next game?
I think they'd probably take a series win, and playing good baseball, like Mets baseball, the way that they've set the standard for themselves. I think, again, I go back to like the organizational shift that's been happening the past few years, and the pride that this team now takes in who they are and their place in the division and their place in the league. And they're not the little brother of the New York Yankees. They're not the other team in New York, right? They've done a really good job of that. The Brewers are a very good team. They are a postseason team. They're playing really good baseball, as you said, Niki. And so if you want to be the best, you got to beat the best. And so I don't need them to sweep Milwaukee, but I need them to show me some grit and show me a little chip on your shoulder, and have that mentality of like relentlessness and ruthlessness to play this game as you head into the weekend. Like the Subway series is always extra hyped. It's funny because like, Andy, I don't know how you feel, but when you kind of talk to the guys about it, they don't see it the same way that media and fans see it. Like, I'm not trying to diminish how awesome it is, but it is really just another game to them. There's pride. Like, don't get it twisted. There's pride on the line, of course. But right now, especially like the Yankees, the last 2 weeks are one of the worst offenses in the league. They also can't get out of their own way. And so this is an opportunity to kind of take advantage of them while you have your own shortcomings. But I need to see a little grit from the Mets, especially after it just looked a little lackluster in Pittsburgh. It just looked a little like it was like they were on, when you can like fast forward a podcast to like 1.5, it felt like they were on like 0.5. Like they weren't even going at one. I just need you to get back to one. That's all.
Yeah, it was like a slow-mo series. There was very little fight, which I think makes it even more frustrating. And Steve Cohen weighed in on this on X. He said, tough stretch, no sugarcoating it. Didn't see this coming. I'm as frustrated as everyone else. We will get through this period. Our injured pitching will come back over the next few weeks. It is unlikely the team hitting with runners in scoring position will continue at this weak pace. Keep the faith. So Steve Cohen, obviously frustrated. He's being a little nice there. I think the Mets fans would not be as nice as that. So let's finish this show by asking both of you. I'll start with you, Andy. Do you have faith in this team?
I do. I think it's a good team. And I think to Dani's point, like there's this larger organizational change that's happening over the course of several years. It's a great point where it always used to be like you take the under with the Mets. It's probably not going to be okay. But they have a different, more winning mentality now. And so I'm betting on that long term. But they got to get their pitching right. Like I said, they're not set up right now to start winning series with the pitching that they have. I'm not saying it can't happen, but guys have to get healthy, guys have to pitch better, and they have to bring in some reinforcements because that's the way that it's going to happen. It's one thing to be like, we got to win this series. It's another thing to be like, but like Senga's out, McGill's out, Manaya's out. So that's where it's tough. I do have faith in them, but with that being said, the pitching's got to get straight.
Yeah. Danny?
Yes. Yes.
Do you have the faith?
Yeah, I do. It's interesting. I'm not going to sit here and compare them to the Dodgers. You could look at the Dodgers and say it's kind of similar, right? The amount of injuries that team has had to sustain, but they also have spent money in ways that the Mets have not. And they have this infrastructure that the Mets do not right now. And so I have seen the Mets be really good, be really dominant to start this season. And so I know it's there. I know some of the pieces have changed, but there's no excuses, right? There's so much talent top to bottom. And if you can get a little length, if you can get Clay Holmes back on track here a little bit, you get McGill back healthy, you get Manaea back, you get Senga back. Like if you get some of those pieces back, and then David Stearns will make some sort of deal, bring somebody in, some relief, which allows Carlos Mendoza to mix and match a little bit more. Maybe you get Brooks Raley back too. Like it's not so far away that the team is going to get back on track. And if I told you, what if I said to you, I said in 1 month, this team will be in the same exact spot, but they'll have a winning record in July, you would take it. It just might take a few more games for them to get settled. But Andy's right. Like it really will come down to how this pitching staff can get back on track. They're going to be the pace cars to allow the offense to take some bumps and bruises. It doesn't get easier with Milwaukee and then the Yankees. Like the Yankees pitching staff has been the best staff over the last few weeks. So it's not going to be easy, but yeah, I have full faith in the team right now.
I have faith in the team. I just think when you lose that badly to the Pirates, it doesn't even matter that your pitching staff is hurt. It's just like you can't lose that bad to the Pirates. But they're lucky they had a huge lead in the NL East, and now they're only 1.5 games back. So it could be worse. They just have to make sure they don't allow it to get worse. It's Clay Holmes on the mound tomorrow against the Brewers. And then, like you said, they have the Yankees backed up against the Brewers before the All-Star break. So, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with us here on Mets Off Day Live. That's going to do it for us. For Danny, Andy, I'm Niki Lattarulo. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you back here next time.